Welcome to Bears on Tap, hosted by Quentin Q. Crisco, Samir Patel, Sonny Verma, and the one and only Ron Luce. Bringing you all the news, analysis, and opinions on the charter franchise, Chicago Bears.
Hello, everybody. We don't normally come to you live on Friday afternoons. In fact, it's very, very rare, unless it's maybe the off season. On top of that, it's Packers week, but we got some other stuff to talk about here today. This is a little bit of a bonus episode for everybody, and this one's called Where Will Home Be? We're going to focus a lot on the announcement from the Chicago Bears, specifically from Kevin Warren this week, regarding the future home for a new Bears stadium. It kind of rocked the internet a little bit. I think a lot of fans were more pissed off than anything else. Not so much because of the substance of it, but rather the timing of it. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about what's at hand and what the possibilities are, and so on and so forth here as everybody starts jumping in with us. It's almost Christmas time. Happy holidays to everybody. I hope everyone is having a good Friday afternoon. It's about 1:45 my time. And Mr. Butkus Stats here. Ron, hello, sir. I wish I could be joined. But again, it's tough for everybody during the middle of the day. So I hope everybody is going to enjoy the show, listening along with me here on the OnTap Sportsnet YouTube. Before we get into anything, of course, head over, if you don't already, and subscribe to the OnTap Sportsnet YouTube channel. You know, when us here at Bears on Tap go live, including all our other great shows, the Bear Blog Boys were just live, I believe, earlier today. We have Four Feathers that'll be live later this afternoon if you're a big Blackhawks fan. And of course, we got everything in between: White Sox, Bulls, Cubs, etc. So head over there, like, subscribe, hit that little bell button. You know when all of our shows go live, including this one. Let's get into it here. The report from this week was that the Chicago Bears have now reopened their search. So this is amidst, I believe it was about 100 days, maybe a little longer than that, since they pretty much doubled down and committed to Arlington Heights being the new home for the eventual stadium. We heard this debacle a season ago where they were considering essentially a stadium built adjacent to where Soldier Field currently stands. And we kind of knew that all that was a load of bullshit when it was all said and done. And it was more of a leverage play of saying, Chicago, if you're going to help us as a city, we don't even have to bother with Arlington Heights, who's giving us problems. Well, fast forward, they say, no, we paid this money for this land in Arlington Heights. We're gonna stick with it. We're gonna commit to it. Now it doesn't seem to be the case. And everybody was upset with the timing. So let's address that. The reason, according to Kevin Warren, the Bears released a statement to season ticket holders, to fans regarding this announcement was because the Chicago Tribune had essentially gotten a source that was they were going to run a story about this. And of course, we know how the Bears are. They've always been very uptight, I think, about their PR, their public relations team has always been on top of things. So they decided to get out in front of it and said, you know what? Instead of you hearing it from somebody else, you're going to hear it from us. And they said, yes, we are looking elsewhere. Now, the reason for this seems to be that, you know, the Bears are trying to get a full idea so that they can essentially get financing for the stadium. They are, again, according to all reports, trying to do this with private equity. They're not really trying to ask the state for much help. But there are a lot of little hurdles that are required with the state to get this done. And this state being the state of Illinois. Well, we've heard the report that the state of Illinois has pretty much told the Bears that in 2026, this is not a priority to them. Arlington Heights is fighting back, saying, well, we would also need infrastructure upgrades. And from everything that you read and you hear, it seems like the state is telling the Bears, you need to help pay for the infrastructure updates to Arlington Heights and around the Arlington Park Racetrack property, so that way the city of Arlington Heights, the village of Arlington Heights, can accommodate 60-something thousand people plus, right? Because of the whole campus idea that was created by the Chicago Bears to accommodate. And the Bears don't want to do that. The Bears are willing to pay for the stadium and the development of the property and things like that, but the roads and things like that typically would be up to the state. Well, I think the one that kind of got everybody off track, insert the state of Indiana, specifically Northwest Indiana, which I'm just going to go ahead and say it now. You'll get a feel for where this conversation's heading. The Northwest Indiana is considered part of the Chicagoland area. And they said, hey, would we be able to build a stadium here? The state of Indiana has already worked on a bill that is, I think, ready to be passed that would allow teams effectively tax-free to build a stadium in the state of Indiana. Now, Q, with some proper sarcasm on a Friday afternoon, says, I have always said out of any state in the USA, Indiana is the one that most deserves 2 football teams. And that's the thing. Indiana's a weird state. And I'm not going to get into people and politics and things like that. In the sense of the northern part of the state is effectively more so considered like the Chicagoland area. Really, anything west of pretty much South Bend is considered the Chicagoland area. And I kind of identifies themselves as a part of kind of the Illinois, Indiana metro area, right? Then you have Indianapolis, which is a solid 3-hour drive from the city of Chicago, down in the middle of the state, which is totally different in Indiana. And obviously that's where the Indianapolis Colts are. So here it stands where people are getting upset that the Bears are trying to choose Northwest Indiana. And I don't think we need to be all that upset. And I'm going to get into that here in just a second. A couple quick comments. Hello. Hi, how are you? Doing well. And hi, Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to you too. Happy holidays, no matter what you celebrate. But this is, for the Bears, this is more about, I think, the infrastructure piece of it than anything else. And when you really think about it, it's no further to drive to Arlington Heights for majority of people in the Chicagoland area. And I say majority. Obviously, if you live in the north suburbs or northwest suburbs, it's very close for you. Than it is to Northwest Indiana for the same reasons. You can get pretty much from the city of Chicago to Northwest Indiana in next to no time at all, especially on a weekend. All right. I'm not talking about peak rush hour during the middle of the week. And you have the southwest suburbs, the southeast suburbs, the west suburbs. Depending where you are, it might be a little easier to get to Northwest Indiana than it is Arlington Heights. So that's where I think this needs to be put into perspective. And that's part of the reason for today's show. Because I want to, be a man of the people. Yes, the Bears are in Indiana. Are they going to change their name to the Midwest Bears or the Indiana Bears? Of course not. It's the Chicagoland area. They're just picking where they build their stadium. The Los Angeles Rams don't play in Los Angeles. They play in Inglewood, California. Is that far from Los Angeles? No, but it would be the same thing if the Bears are playing in Arlington Heights. It's just a different geographical area, and you just don't have an Illinois zip code on the stadium. And quite honestly, if we're being brutally honest with everything, the state of Indiana is more advantageous to businesses. And that's why the Bears are probably exploring this. Because the state of Indiana is chomping at the bit. We know that Northwest Indiana, right? Gary used to be a booming city, and it completely fell off the table when the plants and things like that eventually shut down that were there. They're itching for something. Like, does anybody remember when Chicagoland Speedway was being discussed as a potential site? And everybody was like, oh, this is such stupid. Why would you do that? There's land there. You can develop on it. And to everybody else's point, right? Everybody's, well, they're the Indiana Bears. Q again with some proper sarcasm. If they build the stadium in New Chicago, Indiana, they can be the New Chicago Bears. I think what's all said and done, though, is the land is there. And they're going to have a hell of a lot easier time when it comes to taxation, hell of a lot easier time when it comes to probably getting permits and things because the state of Indiana wants that business. And there's some other little tax things that get put into play here. And we'll talk about those here in a second. But the other thing being distance. They can build on the lakefront in Gary. All right, I'm done with the jokes now, according to Q. But I think there is something to be said. I think you could find a plot of land on the lake if you really wanted it to be on the lake and still have that same feel that it does now at Soldier Field. I think that's completely possible. Is it likely? Probably not, but it's possible. The other thing, too, that needs to be considered is when you earn income as an NFL player, as any player, you are taxed for that check that you earn for that game in that city or in that state. So, for example, baseball is the most chaotic. So we'll use baseball as an example. Let's say the Cubs or the White Sox are on a road trip and they're doing a West Coast swing. So they're in Los Angeles one night to play the Dodgers. They're in Anaheim another night to play the Angels. And then they go to Colorado in their third series to play the Rockies before coming back home. That's more of a Cubs road trip probably than a White Sox, but same. Those players are taxed for those game checks that they earn because it's earned income in that state. They are taxed in those localities, in those states. So any Los Angeles city taxes, as well as California state taxes, apply to that money that was earned. So for all 6 of those games in California, right, assuming they're 3-game series. And then in Colorado, it's the same thing. If Denver has any locality taxes, that impacts them, and so on and so forth. So when you think about all of that, there's actually an advantage here because state income tax is slightly, not much, but slightly lower than it is in Illinois. Right now in the city of Chicago, there's also locality taxes that are applied, especially when you get that high up in terms of dollars and what some of these guys are earning. Locality taxes kick in for the city of Chicago that would not be present on these players' game checks in the state of Indiana. So there might even be a little bit of favoritism for players then because they are technically bringing home a little bit more money per every home game. Because remember, they get paid by the game. They don't get paid like your usual person does every 2 weeks, right? It's every game is how they get paid, unless it's a signing bonus, of course. Then signing bonuses are paid out at a different time and they're taxed differently, and that's a whole nother discussion that we're not going to have today. I really think this is kind of a fascinating track for the Bears. And I think the people that enjoy it the most are those like myself. I'm out in the southwest side of Chicago. It's a hell of a lot easier for me to get to Northwest Indiana than it is to get downtown, specifically to Soldier Field, because of where it is in conjunction with Lakeshore Drive. And even Arlington Heights. Arlington Heights is a good hour from me, especially right now with 294 all ripped up. If you're in the Chicagoland area, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I can hop on 57 to 80 and get to Northwest Indiana in about 30 minutes. Maybe even less if there's less traffic. So there is still some upside for Bears fans. It's not a complete slap in the face. And you hear some of these people, oh, it's such a slap in the face if they leave the state of Illinois. Why? There's teams that don't play in the city that they're in. In fact, most teams don't. Like the Buffalo Bills don't play in Buffalo. They play in Orchard Park. Now, granted, that's 20 minutes away, but the principle of it still applies. Jailbreak has a couple comments here that I wanted to get to. He said, or they say, I guess they were told it will be taken up next fall again, if at all. I agree. And this is relation to what probably the state of Illinois said to the Bears. He says they said there is a lakefront near the state line and the train. I'm not sure how much is really available. Exactly. There is some land available there. And that's kind of where I was taking this. So we'll take this now since this comment kind of segues us there too. I think there's also a way, if you're the Bears, that you can do this very tastefully. And you somehow, some way find a way to get this stadium near the South Shore line. And for those that are out there that go, what the hell is the South Shore line? South Shore line goes into Millennium Station. If you didn't know Millennium Station exists, I can't help you. But it's right under Millennium Park. And that's where the electric liner metros, which a lot of people take to Soldier Field currently, come into the city. That's where they end up instead of going to either LaSalle Street Station over on the south side of the loop, or obviously Union Station or Ogilvie on the west side of the loop. The South Shore line goes to South Bend, Indiana. That's its final stop, with a number of stops within Northwest Indiana along the way. That's a train that doesn't really run a whole lot anymore because its need is not as crucial as it once was. I know for me, who my late grandfather was a huge train fanatic, and we took the South Shore line multiple times. There's some nostalgia, I think, for me personally. But then there is another business essentially that could be resurrected and saying, "Hey, South Shore, you need to pick up how many trains you're running at least on Sundays because we're going to have people that want to come to see the Chicago Bears play." And that could be good business for them in the long run. And again, if you're, it's harder to get there. It's hard to get to Soldier Field as it is. Right? I mean, you pretty much have to drive. If you take the train, it's a 25-minute walk. I've done it. Trust me. I've taken every mode of transportation you humanly can to get to Soldier Field. I've Ubered there from within the city. I've driven there from the suburbs. I've taken the train there via the CTA. The only thing I haven't done is taken the Metro. And the Metro, if you're coming from the suburbs, you're going to have to transfer at Blue Island to get to the electric liners that are going to take you to Millennium Station and right along the Soldier Field kind of pathway there, I'll call it. So there's a lot to be said when it's all said and done. P-Bodes, our good friend of the program. How you doing, buddy? He says, I know I'm late, but please, God, don't move to Gary. I don't know. I don't think they're going to move to Gary. But there's a lot of land in Northwest Indiana as a whole, right? You think anywhere pretty much between the state line and Valparaiso, there's plenty of space if they really wanted to develop on that they could do this. And Quentin says here, if they can provide, and there is easy transit to the stadium location, that would be huge for the Hoosier State. 100%. I think it would be huge for Bears fans because there's still a way to get there besides a car. Like right now, even if you live in the city of Chicago, you pretty much have to drive to Soldier Field unless you're willing to walk a fair distance. There's not a great way to get to Soldier Field as we stand. Obviously, you can take the bus and things like that, but overall, there isn't a super easy way. That was part of the reason that Arlington Heights was so attractive because there is a Metro stop right at Arlington Park, which again used to drop you at the old racetrack. It's right outside there. There's no infrastructure that needs to be built. Maybe you make that station bigger potentially because of the amount of people that would be using it, but it's already in place. It's a remodel. You're not building something from scratch. And I think the South Shore line, you can make the same argument. I think that's an attractive thing. So again, I think people are freaking out about going to Northwest Indiana, but it's really no different than the current setup that a lot of teams have. And I have some of these examples, and this is what I wrote down here in my little notepad that I've got going right here. P-Bodes really quick says, I work in Gary. It sucks. Yeah, unfortunately, Gary's not what it used to be, right? Gary was a booming town when the plants were still open. And when those closed, economic opportunity disappeared. And that's why Gary became what Gary is today. In terms of distance from the city of Chicago, I'm going to, say that in quotation marks here. The Giants and the Jets play in New Jersey. We already know that, right? Meadowlands is in New Jersey. So if you're in New York City, you have to get to New Jersey to go to a Jets or Giants game. There's obviously a ton more opportunity in terms of public transit and things like that to get there, right? Their subway system is far greater reaching than Chicago's is. They've got other opportunities of ways to get there. It's really not that far in terms of physical distance, but in terms of time, it's a fair trek. In addition to that, look at the Washington Commanders. They don't play in Washington, D.C. They don't play in District of Columbia. They play in Landover, Maryland, which is about a 35 to 40-minute trip from the heart of D.C. Then you've got the 49ers. They don't play in San Francisco. And if anybody's familiar with the Bay Area, you've got San Francisco, which is kind of, I'm going to do this in reverse, so bear with me here. If this is the Pacific Ocean, you've got San Francisco, here's the Bay, Oakland is right here, and then at the very southern tip of the Bay is the San Jose area and the Santa Clara area, which is right now where Levi Stadium exists. It's a good hour trip from San Francisco to Santa Clara. So if you're a 49ers fan and you live in San Francisco, you're driving an hour to the game anyway. It's the same equivalent if you go to Arlington Heights. It's the same equivalent if you go to Northwest Indiana. It's all the same. You can make the same argument. You got the Carolinas, right? I live in South Carolina. I'm a Panthers fan. Well, I got to go all the way to friggin' Charlotte, North Carolina to go watch the Panthers play. If you live in Minnesota, right? The Vikings are in Minneapolis, but what if you live in St. Paul? You still got to make the trip to get over there. In addition to that, you also look at, we mentioned Buffalo a little bit, right? Orchard Park is about 20 minutes outside of Buffalo. Foxborough is a 40-minute trip away from Boston. Just because the Chicagoland area is unique because it includes 2 states, because it includes the northwestern section of Indiana and obviously pretty much the northeastern corner of Illinois. But when it's all said and done, the distance and trip that it would take is about the same when it's all said and done. And there's more tax advantage for a business entity. The Bears are still a business, whether you want to admit it or not. There's more opportunity there when it's all said and done. Couple of great comments here. Butkus, our friend Q, says, another factor for ownership, potentially tapping into the middle and eastern Indiana fan base who might be Colts fans currently. Maybe. I think from a market standpoint, because of the way the television market works, they're kind of 2 separate states almost, if you really think about it. Again, Northwest Indiana is incorporated as a part of the Chicagoland area, and that pretty much stretches all the way to New Buffalo. You really don't get into the eastern and southern part of the state all that much. Q notes, though, of course, that he has no dog in this fight. Sure. Peabode said, move them to Tinley Park, right off of Harlem and I-80. Plenty of land to build there. There's a fair amount of land. I don't know if there's enough to build a stadium, though. You would have to probably rip down quite a bit of things, including, the current amphitheater that sits out there, probably the golf course that's out there, the Odyssey golf course, among some other things. And that's still not as big of a piece of land as you can probably get in Northwest Indiana. Jailbreak saying still room in Tinley. I guess that surprises me. Tinley has boomed up and grown quite a bit. And Peabodes, I know you know that you're out in that direction as well. But then you also look at how it could work, I think, for the Bears. And I think the biggest obstacle for the Bears, Arlington Heights makes a lot more sense because Hallis Hall's in Lake Forest. That's not a bad trip. Lake Forest to Arlington Heights. And most of these guys live around Lake Forest because they're there every day. But even right now, the trip to Soldier Field from Lake Forest is not an easy trip. Like it's a fair ride. The ride doesn't get that much longer on a Sunday morning to Northwest Indiana. You just jump on I-90 or you take 94 all the way to 80 and do the same thing. So I think there's a lot to be kind of said about that. And Jailbreak's 100% right here. There are a lot of Bears fans in Indianapolis, transplants alone. That's true, right? I mean, the Colts only arrived in Indianapolis how many something years ago? There's been Bears fans out there for generations before that have probably passed down to their kids and grandkids that are Bears fans. And yeah, you get a lot of people that do move from Chicago to Indy or Northwest Indiana to Indianapolis for, economic opportunity, jobs, etc., that are probably Bears fans. So you're not really losing out on a whole lot. There's a lot of Bears fans in Northwest Indiana. Again, it's pretty much the same market. It's the same television market. It's the same distance. So I think those that are upset because it's the state of Indiana, it's comparable to the Arlington Heights thing. You're just going in a different direction from the city of Chicago. And there's more economic benefit for the Chicago Bears. And the state of Indiana is actually excited to help the Bears, which the state of Illinois right now is not. So, again, I think this is fascinating because it's something that nobody's really considered. But at the end of the day, their headquarters is still going to be in Lake Forest, Illinois. They're still the Chicago Bears. Their stadium just so happens to would potentially exist in Northwest Indiana. But Q says here, how dependent will the Indiana economy be on the NFL if they have 2 NFL teams? I don't think it's necessarily the state as a whole, right? Because you have Indianapolis. There's a ton of businesses in Indianapolis. Indianapolis is not a small city by any means. You have that beyond just the Colts, right? You've also got the Pacers down there. You've got now the Indy Fuel, who are out in the Fishers area, which is just outside of Indianapolis, and they're the Blackhawks ECHL affiliate. There's a lot of professional sports in and around Indianapolis, as well as economic opportunity. I think the Northwest Indiana region is the one that their economy would really benefit from having the Bears, because now you create jobs for a lot of these Northwest Indiana people who already commute into Chicago anyway for work and things like that. There's a reason that if you ever take 8094 at any time after 2:30 in the afternoon, it's a mosh pit because you've got people crossing the state line consistently. That's why it's not that weird. I think the people that are getting upset about it really need to take a step back. And I'll tell you, Pat, I'm right here with you, man. I would love it if the Bears were in Tinley. Absolutely love it. I know you would too. That would be a really easy trip to go to the Bears games. But it's, I really think there's something to be said here. And I think there's a way they can do it tastefully, because as Pat describes here in his concern, he says he'd be totally fine with Northwest Indiana if they avoid Gary and the absolute logistical hell that is Northern Hammond and East Chicago would make transportation very rough. That is 100% true. And again, I think that's why, like, when they say Northwest Indiana, that's a large piece of land that we're, kind of examining here. The Bears could go to, hypothetically speaking, Maryville. They could go to St. John. They could go to Crown Point. They could go pretty much any of those areas right now that are being developed. If anybody drives there, I have a few friends that live in Northwest Indiana, in that kind of Crown Point, St. John, Maryville, that whole big region right off of 65, between 65 and 41. There's a lot of land out there, and it's being developed. So like, you've people moving out there. You have a lot of people that are leaving the state of Illinois because they don't want to pay the taxes and deal with the government and whatever, that are just moving across the state line to Indiana. But that area depends just as much on Chicago as Chicago itself does and the state of Illinois does. So this really is you're just expanding the economic footprint of Chicago per se, with a Chicago representing entity in the Bears. So I agree. I think they have to do it tastefully and correctly to make transportation effective. But there are opportunities for that to happen. And Jailbreak says here, just go through Indy. It's been a while. Huge growth. Huge growth. Absolutely. I've been through Indy a couple times over the last probably 5 or 6 years now. And every time I go back, it feels like it gets more and more robust. So, I think when it's all said and done, the only people that people should really be upset with if the Bears leave, quote unquote, the state of Illinois, is Illinois. They're the ones that are putting up the roadblocks and making it difficult. And the Bears are still a business at the end of the day. They still want to find a place to build this stadium. They know this stadium is going to bring a lot of people there. And you can still have people fly into Chicago and then work their way out to Northwest Indiana. Shit, they might build an airport in Northwest Indiana if the Bears really promote that much growth and economic development. But it would build up an entire region that really probably could use the business. Compared to an Arlington Heights, which, sure, they could use the business. It'd be a huge economic development for Arlington Heights. But there's less obstacles. There's less headache. There's less, I guess, political pushback, we'll call it, for the Northwest Indiana idea than there is for the state of Illinois idea. There's just all things to consider when you hear these reports. And I know a lot of people are saying, oh, it's just, they're strong arming them. I think if you ask the Bears, they want to develop on the Arlington Heights site. There's a reason they purchased the land. They would love to have their team up there. The Metro's right there. You've got I-90 right there. It's 35 minutes from the city. It's no more than an hour pretty much from anywhere around the Chicagoland area. Like, it's an ideal spot, and you can do so much with it. But if the state of Indiana, whose legislators already in process of passing a bill that's going to make it more tax advantage to you to build in their state, why wouldn't you listen? That's not good business if you don't do that. Because nothing is set in stone. Nothing has been signed. No ground has been broken at Arlington Park. And in theory, yeah, maybe they take a loss on their P&L when it's all said and done if they have to sell the land in Arlington Heights. But they're going to make tenfold on that with a new stadium potentially in Northwest Indiana. So again, kind of a long-winded, just sharing my thoughts and opinions. There's a lot more that goes into it than people, I think, realize. And the economic development aspect of it and what it would mean for the state of Indiana, as Q has brought up a few times here in the comments, would be huge. There's a reason they're running to the legislator down in Indianapolis saying, let's get this done. because now the state of Indiana, this whole Northwestern region that's already kind of dependent on the city of Chicago for economic purposes anyway, would have another shot in the arm. Those are union jobs for the state of Indiana to build the actual stadium, and anything they develop around it. That's potential people that want to move there because they want to be close to the Bears, that would potentially move into any, residential development that's near the stadium. Again, thinking of this, the same idea out loud that would happen in Arlington. You flip that then to businesses. If I'm a restaurant in the city of Chicago, like a really nice restaurant, let's say Chicago Cut, Ditka's, there's a ton, right? If I want to open a second satellite location, I want to do it right next to the stadium that's going to attract people and have concerts and things like that all year round. So there's tons of development there. And then again, because the Bears will own all of it, yes, the state of Indiana makes a lot of money on it because of tax revenue and things like that, but the Bears then make hand over fist. That's why they want their own stadium. I don't know if everybody realizes this. They technically lease Soldier Field. They don't own Soldier Field. The Park District of Chicago owns Soldier Field. So the Bears have to share their revenue they make on game days with the city of Chicago. And the McCaskies' money is the Bears. Like, their worth is the Bears. So it's not like they have billions of dollars just sitting around to pay for all these players and these investments and things like that. All their money comes from whatever the team generates, minus what they lose to the city of Chicago. That's why there's an urgency here to get out of the city of Chicago, because it's not advantageous to them as a business to stay. So again, I'm really intrigued to see what happens when it's all said and done. And Jailbreak says, I think we'd all like them to be on the lake downtown with an open air stadium. Leasing from the Park District doesn't make much sense. It doesn't make much sense. For the Bears, it doesn't. But that's what they do. They lease Soldier Field. They lease the ability to use Soldier Field. That's why, the Chicago Fire do the same thing. And yeah, I know people want it on the lake, but it's not gonna be open air. Even if it is on the lake, I think it'd be cool if it's still on the lake, but it's not going to be open air because you can't host concerts and you can't have Final Fours and Super Bowls there if it doesn't have a roof on it. So they're going to put a roof on it. But then you have, again, a thing that the Bears own, and that's going to generate more money for the team. That's going to mean, ideally, a more lucrative future. They're going to be willing to spend all the way up to the salary cap, and they're going to be willing to invest more resources in taking care of the players and things like that. If they build on this land and they have residential housing, they can put young players who get traded there or drafted there up in that housing so they don't have to stress about finding a place to live. There's a lot to be said and done that could happen when the stadium gets built, no matter where that is. Q says here, Northwest Indiana has so much more to gain from building something than the city of Chicago does. 100%. Arguably, even Arlington Heights, because the state of Illinois would have to pony up money then for any infrastructure change. They don't gain as much from that because they already have it. In fact, they have more to lose than they do to gain. But Northwest Indiana has nothing to lose and everything to gain. And that's why they've immediately become part of this. And I wonder if the state of Indiana kind of came to the Bears over the course of the last few months and said, hey, look, we've heard the reports. We know that the state of Illinois is giving you a little bit of a hard time. What if we told you we can make your life a lot easier and make it tax efficient for you? If I'm Kevin Warren as a businessman, my ears perk up. Well, what do you mean? Let's talk. And that's probably what has led to this report, because now the state of Indiana is chomping at the bit, saying, man, we could get the Chicago Bears, the one of the founding teams of this league. They're in our backyard, and that's tax revenue that we got here. And you're 100% right, Q. Just as I said earlier, it's like the New York team's playing in Jersey. There's no difference to it. It's like the San Francisco 49ers playing in Santa Clara, which is closer to San Jose. That's an hour away. Like, this is normal. Jerry World is not in Dallas. It's in Arlington, which is kind of far from Dallas. It's a decent trek. But they still represent Dallas, and nobody questions, are they the Arlington Cowboys? Come on. Jailbreak says, I'd build a closed stadium as an owner. Just hate to see the aspect go. I agree. I'll tell you what, especially as somebody who was just at that freezing cold Bears game this past Sunday against the Browns, There is something romantic about it, even though it's like you lose feeling in your toes after about 30 minutes. But there's economically speaking, there's so much more to gain from just putting a roof on the place and being done with it. And I'm sure players will tell you they don't like playing in the cold. Like, yes, fair weather and whatever, but like most of these guys don't want to play in -0. You know what I mean? I think it's more of a fan conceived thing than it is like a player and team conceived thing. And do they maybe put a retractable roof on it? I don't know. But you also lose some of that elements aspect going to Northwest Indiana than being on the lake. Like being on the lake with the wind and things like that, like that's part of the hometown advantage that Jailbreak has mentioned a few times here in the comments, right? And like hating to see that go if they're not on the lake. Because you kind of lose that if you go, 20 minutes down I-60 or something like that or I-65, pardon me, to, somewhere in Northwest Indiana. So it's fascinating. It's truly, truly fascinating. I don't know where home will be for the Chicago Bears, but I think this little wrinkle with Northwest Indiana has generated more negativity because people just don't think it through before they react. So that's what we're here to do with this bonus episode today. Is just put some thought in your head, and then at least you'll understand why the Bears are considering it. Now, whether or not it happens is an entirely different can of worms. But I really do believe that the pros do outweigh the cons to going to Northwest Indiana. And if they can get it done and they can get it done quickly, I bet you they're going to do it. And then the state of Illinois looks like the clowns with their pants down because they're the ones that lost the Chicago Bears to the state of Indiana. Makes you wonder. It makes you wonder. But I appreciate everybody being so responsive and joining in on this little Friday episode. I hope everybody enjoyed it. Again, just a little bonus episode for everybody. We will be back. Not on Saturday night. Everybody's going to be out and about. We want you guys to join us. Wake up with us early on Sunday morning. It'll be myself. It'll be Samir Patel. Unfortunately, our fearless leader, Mr. Quentin Crisco here, will not be able to make it with us. I know he's doing some traveling for the holidays, as I know a lot of people are. So we'll be live about 8:30 a.m. Central Time talking about this Bears-Packers game. I don't know about you guys. I'm excited for Bears-Packers this time around. And both teams are really banged up. There's a chance Josh Jacobs doesn't play in this game. Obviously, we already know that Micah Parsons is done for the year. And man, I tell you what, I don't root for injuries. I don't care what uniform they wear. I just don't. I can't. As somebody who's torn their ACL before, I don't root for anybody to tear their ACL. It's not fun. But that is a huge advantage for the Bears, not having him. Because now it's just the Rashawn Gary show from a pass rush standpoint. That's a huge domino that really disrupted the flow of the Bears offense and Micah Parsons that's not going to be on the field on Sunday. Christian Watson's playing, but how many hits is he away from potentially being banged up again? The Bears are going to be without Luther Burden and Rome Odunze. You feel a little comfortable, I think, as a Bears fan because you still see Colston Loveland. I think Cole Kmet's probably going to play. Obviously, you still have DJ Moore. Zacchaeus, we'll see his role grow. We might get to see Ja'Day Walker, which I think a lot of people are kind of excited about the opportunity for it. This game's going to be fun. I'm a little pissed off that they're doing it on a Saturday. I think Q shares in my feeling for that as well. I'm going to miss not watching the Bears on Sunday, but I'll tell you what, this game's going to be fun. And these two teams just got done beating the shit out of each other 2 weeks ago, and they're going to do it again. And it's a prime opportunity for the Bears to take the NFC North by the balls and say, we're winning this division. We're hosting playoff games at Soldier Field, and there's nothing you can do to stop us. It's going to be fun. Q says it best. Can't wait. It's going to be awesome. Jailbreak with a final comment. Clock's ticking for the Bears, not so much for Illinois. Yeah, that's true. It's true. It's going to be fascinating. It's going to be fascinating to see, but where will home be? I don't know. But it could be Northwest Indiana for all the reasons that we discussed here on our show. Again, I hope everybody enjoyed this episode. I wish everybody that's listening along with us a happy weekend, a happy holidays, Merry Christmas. Obviously, we'll be back with you before the holiday comes up. We'll be able to talk about this Packers game on Sunday morning. It will for sure be myself and Samir Patel. May or may not be our good friend Sonny Verma as well, but it'll at least be myself and Samir talking about what we hope is a Chicago Bears victory over the Green Bay Packers. Man, that's all I've got. I hope everybody enjoyed this show. I hope everybody enjoyed the look into it. Merry Christmas to you too, Jailbreak. It's going to be a great weekend of Bears football. We got the holiday coming up after it. Then the Bears are back at it against the 49ers before the new year. And then it's a date with the Detroit Lions back at home in the last week of the season on January 4th. I'm really hoping to be in attendance for that game. I'm crossing my fingers. We'll see what happens, which would be a lot of fun because hopefully maybe it's meaningless for the Bears. And that would be pretty incredible. But it'll be interesting to see how things shake out, especially after that Seattle-Los Angeles game on Thursday Night Football and how that's already changing the NFC playoff picture. I'm Ron Luce. I appreciate everybody tuning in with us here at Bears on Tap. We'll see you guys on Sunday morning talking Bears-Packers after this one on Saturday night. And until then, bear down, baby.